What are you making?
I'm mixing up a stew to give corporate a different view. Have a taste. Welcome to the Corporate Kitchen. I'm your host, Tiger, and today on the menu is politics. If you're here and listening, first of all, thank you and welcome back. I know we've been on a little bit of a hiatus recently. The good news here is that we've moved, we've expanded, we got a little bigger. Now we're in a more comfortable setting. So hopefully, as the next set of episodes are released, you see an improvement in the quality and content that is provided. But again, I know one of the things that are most critical for these podcasts is to have that consistency. And the break that we just had was a little extensive. So apologies for that. But if you're listening, welcome back. And I'm excited to talk to you today about politics. This episode is not going to be as controversial as you may think or that the topic may bring emotion to. However, when we're talking about the 101s of corporate America, especially for those new, this is something that's unavoidable. And if you don't have a good in-depth education on the subject, you could be at risk. As the saying goes, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. That also plays into politics as well. When we get into the meat of this episode, it's really going to be going over the three main branches, we'll call them branches, of politics that you have to be prepared for when you're in corporate America. But as we always do, let's start off with the definition. According to the Merriam-Webster, the definition of politics as a noun is 1A, the art or science of government, 1B, the art or science concerned with guiding or influence governmental policy. 1C, the art or science concerned with winning and holding control over a government. 2, political actions, practices, or policies. 3A, political affairs or business, especially competition between competing interest groups or individuals for power and leadership, as in a government. 3B, political life, especially as a principal activity or profession. 3C, political activities characterized by artful and often dishonest practices. 4, the political opinions or sympathies of a person. 5A, the total complex of relations between people living in a society. 5B, relations or conduct in a particular area of experience, especially as seen or dealt with from a political point of view. It's a lot there. The overarching theme is relating to the government. You've heard the term government a lot across all the definitions. The one that we're going to be taking is 3A. That is political affairs or business, especially competition between competing interest groups or individuals for power and leadership, as in a government. I really like that definition because it highlights a couple key words there: power and leadership. When we get to talking about politics, it's always for one or the other. In corporate America, it's usually for both, but it's going to be for either power or it's going to be for leadership. And I like that, as in a government, and the definition is put in parentheses to emphasize that it majorly has to do with competing interest groups. Politics comes and is driven from competition. If everyone agreed, everyone sat at the table and unanimously agreed on a subject, there's nothing political about it. Politics kicks in when there is an indifference of opinion, and now you have competing ideals. We can only choose one at the end of the day. Therefore, an inner power grab is now started. One group wants their idea implemented over the other. Politics ensues. Now we're trying to push our idea as the primary, as the one that gets chosen, as the one that gets implemented, which means if you choose mine, you don't choose the other. The other one doesn't happen. That is a win-lose type scenario. When we talked about in earlier episodes that corporate is a win-lose game. This is why politics are so heavily embedded in corporate, because it is a win-lose scenario, and that is the heart of playing politics. Let's get into the first takeaway so that we can get on this food train. The three type of politics I want to go over with you. First one is obvious. You can guess it. It's literal politics, like governmental, the first definition, the art of science of government. It's governmental politics. It's being able to deal with your government. I'm in the United States of America. We have the 47th president of the United States currently in term in his administration at the time of this episode release. A lot of opinions can be made about that, right? However, when you're thinking about how to navigate corporate America, that should be the focus, or at least for me, being in the United States of America, corporate America, I pay attention to United States government politics. If you're in a different country, it's going to differ a little bit. Different country, different rules, different customs. A really good example of this is the tariff situation that we're getting from this administration. A lot of tariffs are being implemented by the United States administration against other countries. If you're in Germany, for example, you're not actively doing that. So from a political point of view, you're not levying a win-loss trade scenario with other countries, whereas we are, as the United States of America administration, are currently and actively doing that. It requires you to be educated, be aware, and pretty much make a decision. This boils down to, and the food analogy that we're going to give is tortillas. If you call it tortilla, tortilla, whatever, I'm going to use the term tortilla to pronounce it. It comes down to that. If you think about a tortilla in its base, it all comes down to a choice: corn or flour. And the choice is usually on a it depends basis. Depends on what we're doing. If it's like a burrito, more than likely going to be flour. If it's a tostada or something on that spectrum, could possibly be corn. If it's a taco, could go either way. But it's in a normally it depends situation. The depends part is based off the education. When you receive the education of what the scenario you're put in and all the variables that are involved are presented, now you can make a decision on what is the best tortilla that you could use on your side. Remember, it's your decision. So if you choose the flour, corn loses. If you choose the corn, the flour loses. At the same time, though, that may not be a shared opinion. That's when you really start to understand politics. It may not be a shared opinion. So you have a group of you, you're going to have tacos, and it's going to be tacos al pastor. And you're like, okay, based off of the meat, that's not enough information to make a decision. Then you hear that they're going to have some pico and it's maybe some mango salsa. And you're like, oh, okay, that would be really good with corn. And the other people say, no, actually, it's probably better with flour. Bam. Now you have a clash. Can't bring both in. Politics ensues. Who's going to win this power grab? When you're starting off in corporate America, it doesn't matter if you're public sector or private sector. You got to understand from a government perspective what's going on where you are. There are different rules and customs, different pay to plays per se for your corporate environment. There are some countries where you have to pay to play. There's other countries that's like it feels like you're getting everything for free. And then there are some scenarios where because of the political climate, they're probably maybe not in the most illegal way, but getting nearly everything for free. The point is, and the key takeaway is, know your government. Know your government, know what they're going to do, even if you're not in a sector of business that deals with the government. If you're not in the United States, that would be the aerospace and defense companies. They're really big in government contracts. But there are other companies that also have plenty of government contracts. A lot of tech companies, a lot of IT companies have government contracts, a lot of nonprofit organizations as well. There are a lot more people involved in government contracts than you may think. Aerospace and defense companies normally have the largest, so they tend to be the most notable on this subject. However, don't think because you're not in that realm and you're not in that sector that you are immune to what goes on with your government. In addition, their direct policies could affect the game and politics you have to play to get your job done. If you're in sales, let's say automotive sales, you're in automotive sales, your job is to get consumers to buy vehicles. Now, guess what? There are tariffs that are implemented. What do you do with the cost of the vehicle? What do you do with the price of the vehicle? How do you navigate that? Who wins, who loses? Do the consumers lose and you increase the price significantly? Or does the business lose? Business is not going to lose. Therefore, the consumers are normally going to share the brunt of the loss so that you can win. You got to play those politics. You're competing against two ideals. One is the end of the spectrum towards a free trade market, and the other is a tariff in that specific scenario. And the power structure ended up going towards tariffs. Now you have to deal with that. You have to deal with the aftermath. Wherever you are, just make sure you're staying educated on what your government's doing. And that way you can prepare accordingly. When it comes to government decisions, those tend to be a little bit more absolute. If you find yourself on the receiving end where you perceived yourself or your business as the loser in a decision, hopefully you have a risk mitigation plan in place. The company normally does have a risk mitigation plan in place, and that's part of your education as well. When you educate yourself about the government and what your government does, you can also figure out how your company is going to respond to certain things. If a decision's made, what's the response plan? And it helps you prepare your career, your development accordingly, because there could be a situation where the United States administration makes a decision and that directly leads to a reduction in force at your company. If that was the case, you would want to be prepared for that and understand that type of situation. So just be prepared and educate yourself. The second takeaway I want to go to is one that's so common. We only talk about it when it happens. It's so common. It happens so often. And most people don't care. Other people overly care. Regardless, it is something you have to be aware of. And it's our ship. When we talked about mentorship, that was a type of ship, type of relationship. You want to guess what this ship is? This has to do with kinship, nepotism. Nepotism is a type of politics that you also have to deal with in corporate America. So, second takeaway, be aware of the nepotism. Definition of nepotism, for those of you that don't know, or if there's any confusion, according to the Merriam-Webster, it's favoritism as an appointment to a job based on kinship. We talked about ships. Kin is the base word. Kin has to do with in relation to sharing a common ancestry. This happens all the time, where people get far in life not based off of their individual identity and ability, but rather because they have kinship to someone already in power. That is a very interesting power dynamic, because as you fight for your individuality, to show your credentials, to show that you are better than all the other candidates that presented themselves, and to get picked, excluding all of that just because you're not related to the person in charge, that's a tough battle. That is a very tough battle because it changes your perspective on things entirely. Where you thought the competing interest groups were your peers, you learn it, you were never competing at all. And that's the hard truth when it comes to nepotism that really gets people excited about the topic, and excited not in a good way. But it really makes you sit down and realize that you were never truly competing. You thought that there was interest groups that you were in competition in, and if you worked a little bit harder, you can show that you outshine your peers. You could show that you were the best of that bunch of individuals. But you were doing it for showing that you're the leader amongst the group. You're the best. This was a power move. Nepotism is a straight power move, and it's the kinship that creates generational wealth most of the time, but also opportunity. The opportunity for wealth. When you have people that come from wealthy families, obviously they want to keep the wealth across their generation, which means they're going to intentionally create opportunities for the next line in their or not in their ancestries, the other way around, in their succession. And it's not a thing of skills, credentials, ability. It has 100% to do with power. Now, it's obvious at companies in which the person in power shares the same last name as the name of the company. Obviously, you know what you're dealing with there. Other large corporations, it's a little bit more subtle, and it's a little bit more of a game you have to pay attention to, which is why the takeaway is just be aware of it. If you're going to go to a Tex-Mex place and you're going to order a burrito, asking for corn tortilla, people may be like, I don't know about this one, right? If you're going tacos at a certain place that exclusively uses corn and you ask for flour, and they're known for their corn tacos, they may look at you and scratch their head. Obviously, they're going to give you what you want, but in terms of gaining the power, gaining the leadership, playing the game, you're not going to be doing it correctly. When we're in the office, make sure you are looking at last names. It is amazing how many times people will miss junior, the second, the third, the fourth, and not even realize that that relationship exists in the company. And I will say this, from what I've seen, and we'll talk this more on Thursday, the nepotism is stronger parent to child than it is person to spouse. There's a stronger power and leadership appointment for your next of kin, right? Because we're talking about a kinship here. So you really want to make sure your next of kin is set up correctly, leaves your legacy, pass down everything that you want, rather than across. The across version, where it's person to spouse, exists, usually more subtle. It's usually more subtle. Part of the reason is you don't want to get caught up in workplace policies where it seems like the relationship is inappropriate. Other times, they just don't want the attention. I've met plenty of couples where one side wanted to be the one that moved up, the other, I will subtly sit in the background and just get things done. But the parent to child relationship, that is one that you really need to make sure you're aware of. That can put you in a lot of trouble if you aren't aware. And sometimes it's niece nephew, uncle, aunt to niece nephew type relationship too. That's almost as bad as parent to child. Just something you have to be aware of in a game of politics you have to play. Mind you, when you play these politics, and if you're competing with someone that got their power, their appointment through nepotism, you're always going to be on the losing side of that. You have to play that you're always on the losing side of that. It's just how life is. It's just how that political process is. Not all politics is started from an equal level. If you think about the United States government, if you are the party, the political party in control, and the other party wants to make a decision, what's the terms we always use? We have the majority and the minority. If the minority wants to make a decision, it's going to be that much harder to quote unquote overcome the majority to get a play for power. When you're talking about nepotism, it's the same thing. You're the minority, they're going to be the majority. You're already starting off on the losing side. It's not been decided, it's not a closed case, but do understand that you are on the losing side of this battle. And the challenge to overcome, gain the majority, and close winning the majority is a lot harder than another scenario where it's much closer to 50-50 from the start. Mind you, sometimes you may get into scenarios where it's just at zero. You walked in at zero and you tried to make a play for even 12%. You walked in at zero, you'll walk out at zero. There's some nepotism that's that strong. Be aware of it. You gotta be aware of it. The last takeaway that we'll talk about is, and the last branch of politics that you really have to keep your head in the game for, is the common sense business leadership politics. Leadership is political, period. Period. There's no level of leadership that is not. When you become a leader, a formal leader, you have power. You have dominion over a group of individuals. Not in a harsh way. We're not talking that, a control sort of thing. It's about responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. You're given the responsibility for a larger group of people. And if it's a C-suite executive, you're talking over a large portion of the company. That responsibility is why you have the power title. And it's a lot of power. To get to that level, you would have had to compete with a lot of different interest groups. You would have had to win against those groups as well. Guess what? Those groups just didn't leave because you made it to power. Maybe some did, but not everyone. Not everyone's gone just because you rose to power and got it. They still exist. So even with that power, you're still competing. You're still playing politics. As we mentioned in earlier episodes, you're still trying to influence people. The influencing never ends just because you got there, just because you now hold the highest title that exists. It all still becomes and stays a land of just straight political affairs and business. For you, coming into corporate America, you gotta keep the sunglasses off. You gotta see. The sun is not that bright. It's not gonna blind your eyes. Open your eyes and see what's going on. Understand the common sense when it comes to leadership. There's a lot of decisions that people would consider no-brainers. Hey, morality says you should really go this path. From a political standpoint, doesn't always align. There's a lot of times where you may feel that you know the answer and you know what they should be doing at the higher level. Well, guess what? You're not in a position of power. You have a minority opinion. It sometimes could be the majority. Sometimes it could be the majority opinion, but none of you have that power. None of you have the ability to make that decision. And I know some people are like, oh, wait. I'm a shareholder, though. If enough of us vote, we should be able to overthrow. True. And if you think about a lot of those clauses that are being voted on annually at shareholder meetings, what does the literature have? It usually has a recommendation. They walk to you already trying to influence you, playing politics, saying, here's the scenario, here's how you should be voting. So they've already started the political game before you even had a chance to assess the situation. Kind of the same thing in reverse when you're thinking about the decisions they have to make, where you've already come up with a full assessment and it's like, oh, we should really go this way. Well, for them, they're thinking about something totally different. They're thinking about the entire company and they have to make a decision based off of that. Whereas your quick assessment recommendation is based off of the realm that you see. Be aware of that. Leadership is politics. There's constant influencing and negotiations that have to be done in order to try to convince people to do things. When you're in a position of leadership, just know that there are decisions that are going to be out of your hands because you're just playing politics. If your boss says to go left and you think the best direction is to go right, what do? You have 20 minutes to figure it out. Do you do your best in the minority level to try to challenge the majority and get them convinced to your side to go right? Do you just go right anyway and deal with the consequences of that? Or do you follow your leadership and just go left? A lot of those types of scenarios are in play every single day. When you assess your leadership, don't forget to remember they're playing the politics game too. Some of them are just bad at leadership. Let's just get that out there. Some leaders are just bad at leadership. Other leaders are good leaders, bad at politics. They turn into yes sir, yes ma'am, got to do this just because that's what I was told, and they don't play the political game. They don't get involved in the level of influencing that's required when you are in a realm of competing interest groups. They choose not to compete and say, I will just align my interests with those that are giving me the direction. That is a very intentional world to live in because that is a choice that affects other variables, your morality, your perception, your ability to influence, all gets affected by even choosing not to compete. So, in a way, that type of person is still playing politics. The avoidance of is still an act of politics. When you choose to sit by the sideline, and you all know, you've all seen this, when something horrible happens, and we tend to remember it when it's something horrible that happens, and the leadership that just does nothing, that says absolutely nothing. And once the top level leadership communication comes through, they're like, they still don't say anything because you got the top level leadership communication and they don't even try to bring up the situation or engage because they're avoiding the politics. They're avoiding having a competing interest. That is a level of politics too. When you finally become a manager, when you finally get into leadership, don't think of it as I have to play my politics well. I need to get in politics and understand it and be able to do all these things. It's going to come naturally because leadership is politics and it all has to go back into influencing. One of the definitions for politics, if we go back to it, 1B was the art or science concerned with guiding or influencing governmental policy. The reason we didn't choose that definition is because it said governmental policy. You could easily substitute the word governmental with personal, with business, with managerial. There's so many things that you could substitute that word for just to holistically show that the true art of politics is that guiding or influencing portion. It tends to lean to governmental because that's where the base of the word has to do with it. I mean, it has to do with the art of science or government, so it makes the most amount of sense. However, if you want to think of it holistically, it's really, which is why we have the 3A definition, political affairs or business. It really has to do with everything. All the guiding, all the influencing you get in as a manager, you're going to have to do those two things. And check this out, up and down. When you're at the bottom of the totem pole, when you're first starting, you're usually only influencing up. You're getting it from your direct first line manager, maybe even two levels above that, but your influence goes straight up. You get into leadership, now you're in the middle. You're getting yourselves in the middle. Even if you're at the chief executive officer position, you still have to answer to the chairman of the board and the shareholders. You're still putting yourself in that middle. Now your level of influence is down and up. That is a very difficult position to be in, and it will challenge you to learn how to influence, how to guide as you're dealing with competing interest groups by definition, being in the middle, right? Let's go over that one more time. Leadership is politics because by definition, you're dealing with competing interest groups. You're dealing with your subordinates versus your leaders. Two competing groups of people. They're not always aligned. 9.5 times out of 10, they're not aligned. And you need to influence and guide both levels while making decisions for yourself that's for the best interest of your career and your development as well. Therefore, you're going to practice politics all the time. Even if you're not thinking about it in the forefront, it just happens. And that's just something to be aware of. That leadership is politics. When you're dealing with leadership or you are a leader yourself, you're going to dive in it. And it all comes in down to influencing, being able to influence people properly. We've had plenty of episodes before this one that talks about the different types of relationships, influencing techniques, as well as just dealing with people in corporate America, whether on a mentorship type relationship or a dating type relationship. Plenty of different ways of dealing with and interacting with people. And it's all going to come down to the way that we influence them. So with that, let's do a wrap up and close this tortilla finally. By the way, in that tortilla discussion, I'm a corn person. Unless it's like a burrito. For a burrito, I'll do flour. Everything else, I do like the corn. It's like really good. I don't know why. I've always been a corn tortilla type of person. But let's wrap this episode up. The 3 takeaways that we have. And it's the 3 branches of politics that I just want you to remember. Government. Educate yourself on the government. Be aware of your government, what they're doing. Understand that your government is different from other governments as well. So you can't make the assumption that, hey, I'm in the United States of America where I live and work. If I go to Singapore, they're going to do the exact same thing. Not true. So you have to educate yourself on the government that you're working with to understand the political nature that you are currently operating in. 2, one of the underrated versions of politics that you do have to be aware of. Just be aware of this. Not a lot that you can do, but you have to be aware of nepotism. Be aware of the nepotism. It sucks, but it exists for that kinship relationship. That kinship relationship is really strong and it's really important to the wealthy community. So they're going to make sure they take care of theirs. The last takeaway, leadership is politics. Whether you are in leadership or you're hoping to get into it, you're going to be playing the political game. It doesn't matter. You can sit here and be a person that says, hey, I don't even vote for the government till elections. I don't get myself involved in politics. But you want to be a manager? Guess what? You're going to be involved in politics. And it's going to be okay because you're going to learn how to influence and you're going to learn how to be the best version you can be at influencing. And with that, we'll turn off this stove, take off the thinking apron, and let's just say the dishes will get done later. This topic wasn't a big mess, but if we learned something today, then we know there's a little cleaning up to do. I do want to talk this topic more, maybe trade stories about this soon, like this Thursday soon. I hope to see you there. Thanks for being in the corporate kitchen today. I'm your host, Tiger. Until next time.